Imagine being one of the richest men in America, owning private jets, luxury estates, and a technology empire worth billions of dollars. Yet waking up every morning feeling completely powerless. Not because of business, not because of money, but because of two little girls. Nathan Blackwood stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Seattle mansion and stared at the gray morning sky. From the outside, his life looked perfect. Forbes magazine called him a visionary. Investors called him a genius. Employees called him a legend. But none of those titles mattered when he walked past the bedrooms of his twin daughters every morning. Because behind those doors lived two children who had forgotten how to smile. Emma and Lily Blackwood were 6 years old. Before tragedy entered their lives, they had been inseparable bundles of joy. They filled every room with laughter. They danced through hallways. They sang songs at the dinner table until their mother laughed so hard she nearly cried. Then one rainy night changed everything. A distracted driver ran a red light. Victoria Blackwood never made it home. The funeral came. The flowers faded. The guests left. But the grief remained. And somehow it settled deepest inside the hearts of two little girls. For 18 long months, Emma and Lily shut themselves off from the world. They rarely spoke. They refused to play with other children. They pushed away therapists, teachers, and anyone who tried getting close. Nathan spent hundreds of thousands of dollars searching for help. The best child psychologists. The best counselors. The best specialists money could buy. Nothing worked. Then came the nannies. One after another. 11 in total. Each arriving with confidence. Each leaving with defeat. Some lasted weeks. Others lasted days. One walked out before sunrise after her very first night. The staff no longer bothered learning new nannies' names. They all left eventually. At least that was what everyone believed. 300 miles south, in a small Oregon coastal town, Claire Parker was finishing another exhausting day. Her apartment was tiny. The wallpaper peeled in places. The kitchen sink leaked. And the old heater rattled every time it turned on. She lived there with her grandmother, Eleanor, the woman who had raised her after her parents died when she was young. Money was always tight. Some months they had just enough to pay the bills. Some months they didn't. But despite everything, Eleanor always found reasons to smile. Claire was drying dishes when her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost. "Hello," a calm professional voice answered. "Am I speaking with Miss Claire Parker?" "Yes. My name is Rebecca Collins from Blackwood Family Services." Claire frowned. The name sounded familiar. Then she remembered. Weeks earlier, she had submitted an application through a childcare agency. She had completely forgotten about it. "We've reviewed your profile," Rebecca continued, "and we'd like to offer you an interview for a live-in nanny position." Claire nodded. "Okay. The salary is $200,000 per year." The plate slipped from Claire's hand and crashed back into the sink. "What?" "The family would like someone to start immediately." Claire sat down. Her heart raced. $200,000. It sounded unreal. There must be a reason the salary is that high. For a moment, the woman on the phone said nothing. Then she sighed softly. "There is." Claire swallowed. "What reason?" "The children." A chill moved through her. "What about them?" "No nanny has been able to stay." Claire tightened her grip on the phone. "How many?" 11. Silence filled the room. Then Rebecca added quietly. "The twins lost their mother 18 months ago." Claire looked toward her grandmother sitting nearby. Something in her chest softened. Because she understood loss. She understood what grief could do to a family. That night, she packed a single suitcase. 3 dresses. A few books. Family photographs. And the small Bible her grandmother insisted she take. Before bed, Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Remember something, Claire." "What is it, Grandma?" The old woman smiled. "Love reaches places money never can." The next morning, Claire boarded a bus headed toward Seattle. Hours later, she stood before towering black iron gates. Blackwood Manor. The estate stretched farther than she could see. Perfect gardens. Luxury vehicles. Sparkling fountains. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked intimidating. Claire suddenly became aware of her simple shoes. Her modest clothes. Her single suitcase. She looked completely out of place. Then the gates began to open. Slowly. Almost like the mansion itself was deciding whether to let her enter. Claire took a deep breath. And stepped forward. She had no idea that behind those walls were 2 little girls who had forgotten how to laugh. a billionaire father who had forgotten how to hope, and a story that was about to change all of their lives forever. Welcome to Super Stories. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from: the USA, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, or anywhere else in the world. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful billionaire stories filled with emotion, family, unexpected twists, and unforgettable endings. The gates closed behind Claire with a heavy metallic sound. For some reason, it felt less like entering a home and more like stepping into another world. A world where everything was bigger, cleaner, quieter. The driveway curved through acres of perfectly trimmed gardens before stopping at a mansion, so large it made Claire's apartment building look like a storage shed. She tightened her grip on her suitcase. A woman dressed in a dark navy suit descended the front steps. Her posture was straight, her expression unreadable. "You must be Claire Parker." "Yes, ma'am." The woman nodded once. "My name is Margaret Reeves. I manage the household." She glanced briefly at Claire's suitcase. "Follow me." Inside, the mansion felt even larger. Marble floors stretched endlessly. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that seemed impossibly high. Every surface gleamed. Yet despite its beauty, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. Like laughter had been banned. Like happiness itself had moved away. Margaret led her through the grand foyer. As they passed a wall of framed photographs, Claire slowed. A handsome man stood smiling beside a beautiful woman with warm eyes. In another picture, the same couple held 2 newborn girls. There were beach vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family moments frozen in time. Then suddenly the photograph stopped. No recent pictures. Nothing after Victoria Blackwood. Claire didn't need anyone to explain. The wall told the entire story. Margaret noticed where she was looking. Mr. Blackwood had those photographs removed from the rest of the house. Claire turned toward her. "Why?" The older woman's expression softened for the first time. "Because seeing them hurts." They continued down a long hallway. Finally, Margaret stopped outside a pair of white double doors. "The twins are inside." Claire felt her heartbeat quicken. "Any advice?" Margaret actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it wasn't. Every nanny asks that question. And the house manager looked directly at her. "Don't take it personally." Before Claire could ask what that meant, the doors opened. Inside stood one of the most beautiful nurseries she had ever seen. Sunlight poured through tall windows. Shelves overflowed with toys. Stuffed animals lined the walls. Everything looked perfect. Everything except the children. Emma sat alone beside the window staring outside. Lily sat on the floor holding a worn stuffed rabbit. Neither looked up. Neither smiled. Neither acknowledged Claire's presence. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Claire knelt down. "Hi." "Nothing. I'm Claire." Silence. "I heard you're both experts at hide and seek." Still nothing. The twins acted as if she didn't exist. Margaret crossed her arms. She had seen this countless times before. The rejection always started this way. Slow. Cold. Complete. Claire tried again. "My grandmother says the best people are always the hardest to meet." Emma glanced toward her briefly, then looked away. The tiny reaction lasted less than a second. But Claire noticed. So did Margaret. Interesting. Most nannies never got even that much. Suddenly another voice filled the room. Deep. Calm. Controlled. "How are they?" Claire turned. A tall man stood in the doorway. Nathan Blackwood. The billionaire himself. His charcoal suit looked flawless. His posture was confident. But his eyes told another story. Exhaustion. Loneliness. Pain. The kind of pain that never fully leaves. Margaret answered first. "About the same." Nathan nodded. His gaze shifted to Claire. For several seconds he studied her. Not judging. Evaluating. "You understand this won't be easy." Claire stood. "No, sir." One eyebrow lifted. "No." She shook her head. "I understand it will probably be very difficult." For the first time, something almost resembling amusement appeared in his eyes. Almost. Then it vanished. "My daughters don't trust strangers." Claire looked toward the twins. "I wouldn't either." That answer caught him off guard. For a moment neither spoke. Then a sudden crash interrupted the silence. Everyone turned. Emma had picked up a toy and thrown it across the room. The toy struck the wall and fell. Lily immediately began crying. Loudly. The sound echoed through the nursery. Margaret sighed. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. The familiar storm had begun. And according to history, this was usually the moment a new nanny started regretting her decision. But Claire did something unexpected. Instead of reacting to the tantrum, she quietly walked over, picked up the toy, sat on the floor, and placed it beside her. Then she smiled. "That's okay." Emma frowned. Claire nodded. "You can throw it again if you need to." The room fell silent. Even Margaret blinked. Because for the first time in months, someone wasn't fighting the twins. And nobody yet realized that this small moment was about to become the beginning of something extraordinary. The first real test came that night. By sunset, Claire understood why 11 nannies had failed. The twins were not simply difficult. They were hurting. And hurt children often spoke a language adults didn't understand. Dinner became a battle before it even began. Emma refused to sit at the table. Lily pushed away every spoon Claire offered. When Claire tried encouraging them, both girls burst into tears. Not loud tantrums. Not angry screams. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deeper. Somewhere broken. The house staff exchanged knowing looks. They had seen this movie before. Another nanny. Another disaster. Another resignation waiting to happen. Margaret stood quietly in the doorway. Watching. Waiting. Expecting Claire to lose her patience. Instead, Claire surprised everyone. She sat down on the carpet beside the twins. Not above them. Not over them. Beside them. The way someone sits with a friend. "You don't have to eat right now," she said gently. Emma looked suspicious. Lily sniffled. Claire smiled. "But I am hungry." She picked up a carrot stick from the plate, took an exaggerated bite, then made a ridiculous face. She pretended to think. "This carrot tastes like socks." For a second, nothing happened. Then Lily blinked. Twice. Claire grabbed another piece. "Nope. This one tastes like elephant ears." Emma's eyebrows moved slightly. The tiniest reaction. So small most people would have missed it. But Claire saw it. And she kept going. "This broccoli definitely tastes like dinosaur feet." A strange sound escaped Lily. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a cough. But something close. Very close. The staff exchanged surprised glances. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Interesting. Very interesting. The real challenge began after bedtime. At precisely 9:17 p.m., the crying started. First Lily. Then Emma. Within seconds both girls were screaming. The sound echoed through the mansion. Sharp. Desperate. Heartbreaking. Claire rushed into the nursery. Emma stood in her bed clutching the rails. Lily sat curled into a corner, tears streaming down her face. Neither wanted water. Neither wanted toys. Neither wanted stories. They simply cried, as if their tiny hearts were remembering something painful, something they couldn't explain. Claire tried rocking them. The crying continued. She tried reading books. The crying continued. She tried singing children's songs. The crying somehow became louder. Midnight arrived. Then 1 o'clock. Then 2. Still no sleep. Still no peace. Claire's arms felt like lead. Her eyes burned from exhaustion. For a brief moment she understood why the others had quit. Most people thought caring for children required energy. What it actually required was patience. And patience was harder. Far harder. Especially when nothing seemed to work. At around 3 in the morning, Claire noticed something. Every time Lily cried hardest, she reached toward a small stuffed rabbit. The same worn rabbit she'd carried all day. Emma, meanwhile, kept staring at a framed photograph sitting on the nursery shelf. A photograph of Victoria, their mother. Claire slowly walked over, picked up the picture, then sat cross-legged on the floor. Was she your mommy? The crying softened slightly. Emma stared. Lily stared. Claire looked at the photograph. Victoria's smile seemed warm enough to light a room. She looks like she gave really good hugs. Silence. Then Emma whispered something. So quietly Claire almost missed it. She did. Claire froze. The room froze. For a second she wondered if she'd imagined it. Because according to everyone in the mansion, Emma barely spoke anymore. But she had spoken. Just now. 1 sentence. 5 words. Yet it felt like a miracle. Claire smiled softly. I thought so. Neither twin cried for several seconds. The longest pause of the entire night. Then Claire did something nobody had tried before. She didn't distract them from their mother. She talked about her. Tell me about her. The girls said nothing. But they listened. Claire talked about mothers. About missing people. About how love doesn't disappear just because someone isn't physically there. She spoke quietly. Gently. like someone tending a fragile flame. Slowly, very slowly, the tears began to stop. At 4:11 a.m., exhaustion finally won. Emma fell asleep first, curled beside Claire on the rug. Lily followed minutes later, one tiny hand wrapped around Claire's sleeve, as if she was afraid Claire might disappear. Claire remained exactly where she was, afraid to move, afraid to break the moment. Outside the nursery door, Nathan stood frozen. He had been awake most of the night, listening, waiting for another nanny to fail. Instead, he found something he hadn't seen in almost 2 years. His daughters sleeping peacefully, and beside them sat Claire, exhausted, hair messy, still wearing the same clothes from earlier. But she hadn't given up. Most people saw stubborn children. Claire saw grieving children. And somehow, that made all the difference. Nathan looked through the doorway for a long moment, then quietly walked away. But one thought followed him down the hallway. For the first time since Victoria died, maybe there was hope after all. The next morning, Claire woke with a stiff neck and an aching back. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she looked down. Emma was asleep with her head resting on Claire's lap. Lily was curled against her shoulder, still clutching her stuffed rabbit. Claire smiled, carefully, slowly. She didn't want to wake them, but the movement was enough. Emma opened one eye, then the other. For a few seconds, she simply stared at Claire, like she was trying to understand why the nanny was still there. Most people left. That was what adults did. They left. But Claire hadn't. "Good morning," Claire whispered. Emma didn't answer. Yet she didn't move away either. For the first time, that felt like progress. Downstairs, breakfast was already being prepared. The cook nearly dropped a tray when he saw Claire enter with both girls holding her hands. Not running away. Not crying. Holding her hands. Word traveled through the mansion faster than wildfire. The driver heard. The gardeners heard. Even the security guards at the front gate heard. The new nanny had survived the night. And somehow the twins hadn't sent her packing. Margaret watched from across the dining room. She had worked for the Blackwood family for nearly 15 years. Long enough to know miracles were rare. Yet something unusual was happening. Something nobody could explain. Later that afternoon, rain began falling against the windows. Seattle's gray skies settled over the estate. The twins became restless. The weather always seemed to make things worse. Claire searched for ways to keep them occupied. She tried coloring books. 5 minutes. Building blocks. 3 minutes. Cartoons. 2 minutes. Nothing worked. Then she noticed a closed door at the end of the hallway. A room she hadn't seen before. The handle was covered in a thin layer of dust. Curious, she gently pushed it open. Inside, time seemed frozen. The room was beautiful. A grand piano sat beside tall windows. Books lined the shelves. Family photographs filled the walls. And everywhere she looked, there were traces of Victoria Blackwood. A scarf draped over a chair. A half-finished journal. A framed photograph resting beside the piano. Claire immediately understood. This had been Victoria's favorite room, and nobody had touched it since she died. Tiny footsteps sounded behind her. Emma and Lily stood in the doorway, silent, watching. Claire expected them to leave. Instead, they slowly walked inside. Emma approached the piano. Her small fingers brushed across the keys. A soft note filled the room. Then another. Then another. Lily walked toward a bookshelf. Her eyes landed on a large photo album. She pulled it free. Dust floated into the air. Claire hesitated. "Would you like to look at it?" Neither girl answered. But they climbed onto the sofa beside her. That was answer enough. The first photograph showed Victoria holding 2 newborn babies. Emma pointed immediately. "Mommy." It was the first full word Claire had heard from her all day. "Yes," Claire said softly. "That's Mommy." Page after page revealed moments frozen in time. Beach trips, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations, happy memories. As they turned each page, something remarkable happened. The girls started talking. Not much. Not complete conversations. Just little pieces. Tiny memories. Tiny feelings. But after nearly 2 years of silence, every word felt precious. Mommy made pancakes. Mommy sang songs. Mommy liked flowers. Claire listened carefully. She never interrupted. Never corrected. Never rushed them. She simply let them remember. Then Lily found a picture taken just weeks before the accident. Victoria sat on a picnic blanket with both girls in her lap. Everyone was laughing. The image seemed almost alive. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Emma looked away. The room grew quiet. Very quiet. Claire gently wrapped an arm around each girl. Nobody spoke. For nearly a minute, there was only silence. Then Lily whispered the question nobody in the mansion had ever answered. Did Mommy leave because we were bad? Claire felt her heart break. The words landed like a punch. Suddenly everything made sense. The fear, the sadness, the anger. These little girls had been carrying a burden far too heavy for children. Somewhere along the way, they had convinced themselves that their mother left because of them. Claire pulled them closer. "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice trembled. "No." Lily's lip quivered. Emma looked up, waiting, hoping, praying. Claire brushed tears from Lily's face. "Your mommy loved you more than anything in the world." The twins listened without blinking. "Nothing you did made her leave." "Nothing. Not one thing." Tears rolled down Emma's cheeks. For the first time, she didn't hide them. She simply cried. And Lily cried with her. Not the angry cries Claire had heard before. These were different. These were healing tears. The kind that wash pain away little by little. Standing outside the room, unseen by anyone inside, Nathan Blackwood felt his knees weaken. He had come upstairs looking for a business file. Instead, he had overheard every word, every painful question, every heartbreaking answer. His daughters thought their mother left because of them. And he had never known, never seen it, never understood. Nathan pressed a hand against the wall. For the first time since Victoria's death, tears filled his eyes. Inside the room, Claire sat between the twins, holding them close as they cried. Outside the room, a billionaire father realized that the woman he hired to care for his daughters was doing something nobody else had managed to do. She wasn't just looking after them. She was helping them find their way back to life. The following Saturday began like every other day at Blackwood Manor. Gray clouds hung over Seattle. The household staff moved quietly through their routines. Nathan buried himself in emails and conference calls. And the twins woke up grumpy. At least, that was how the day started. Nobody could have guessed how it would end. By mid-morning, Claire had exhausted nearly every activity she could think of. Coloring books, story time, building blocks, even the girls' favorite picture album. Nothing seemed to hold their attention. Emma kept pacing around the nursery. Lily looked bored enough to cry. Claire glanced out the window. The clouds had finally parted. Sunlight spilled across the gardens. An idea appeared. A simple idea. The kind that often changes everything. "Would you girls like to go outside?" The twins looked at her. Outside. They hadn't spent much time in the gardens since their mother's death. The vast estate had become another place filled with memories. Another place that hurt. Claire stood. "We don't have to stay long." Emma hesitated. Lily squeezed her rabbit. Then, surprisingly, both nodded. 20 minutes later, they stood in the enormous backyard. The estate stretched across acres of rolling green lawns. Flower gardens bloomed in every direction. A small decorative pond sparkled beneath the sunlight. The twins stayed close to Claire at first, almost nervous, like explorers stepping onto a new planet. Claire smiled, then spotted a garden hose near the flower beds. An idea formed immediately, a mischievous one. She turned the water on. A thin spray arched through the air. Emma frowned. "What are you doing?" Claire grinned. "Something very important." Lily looked suspicious. "What's important?" Claire aimed the hose toward the sky. The water sparkled like diamonds. Then she stepped underneath it, immediately pretending to be shocked. "Oh no," she gasped dramatically. "It's raining." The twins stared, confused. Claire spun in circles. "It's raining right here." She pointed at the completely sunny sky. But nowhere else. Emma blinked. Lily blinked. Then Claire accidentally sprayed herself again. At least, she pretended it was an accident. The girls watched her stumble backward dramatically. And then, something happened. A tiny sound escaped Emma's mouth. A laugh. Small, brief, but unmistakable. Claire froze. The sound vanished instantly, as if Emma was surprised by it herself. But Claire had heard it, and so had Lily. "Did you just laugh?" Claire asked. Emma crossed her arms. "No, you did." "No, you definitely did." Lily suddenly giggled. Emma rolled her eyes. Then Claire accidentally sprayed both girls. Water splashed across their shoes. The twins screamed. Not from fear. From surprise, Claire gasped dramatically. Oh dear, now she was in trouble. Big trouble. Because two little girls were suddenly chasing her. What happened next would be remembered by everyone who witnessed it. The twins ran through the grass, laughing, squealing, splashing water everywhere. Claire pretended to run away. The girls chased her. She chased them back. For the first time in nearly 2 years, Emma and Lily weren't thinking about grief, or loss, or sadness. They were simply being children, the way they were always meant to be. At that exact moment, Nathan stepped onto the balcony outside his home office. He was in the middle of an important phone call, one worth millions of dollars. Then he heard it. Laughter. Real laughter. His daughter's laughter. Nathan froze. The voice on the phone kept talking. He didn't hear a word. Slowly, he looked down. And there they were. Emma, Lily, running through the gardens, laughing harder than he had heard since Victoria was alive. Claire was right in the middle of it all. Completely soaked. Completely ridiculous. And completely happy. For several seconds, Nathan forgot how to breathe. Because the scene below felt impossible. Like watching a dream. Or a memory. For one heartbreaking moment, it looked exactly like the afternoons Victoria used to spend with the girls. The same joy. The same freedom. The same light. Nathan's eyes burned unexpectedly. He quickly ended the phone call. But he didn't move. Couldn't move. He simply stood there. Watching. Remembering. Feeling something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Eventually Claire noticed him. Their eyes met across the garden. For a moment neither spoke. Neither smiled. Yet something passed between them. A silent understanding. Nathan looked at his daughters. Then back at Claire. And gave a small nod. It wasn't much. But for a man like Nathan Blackwood, it meant everything. It was gratitude. Pure and genuine. The first gratitude he had felt since the day his world fell apart. That evening, after the twins had fallen asleep, Nathan sat alone in his study. The house was quiet, but this time the silence felt different. Lighter, warmer, almost alive. His phone sat on the desk. Several times he picked it up. Several times he put it down again. Finally, after nearly 10 minutes, he opened a message and typed 3 simple words. Thank you, Claire. He stared at the screen for several seconds, then pressed send. Across the mansion, Claire's phone buzzed. She looked at the message and smiled. A tired smile. A grateful smile. Then she typed back. They're amazing girls. We just needed to remind them. Nathan read the reply. And for the first time in a very long while, the billionaire smiled. The weeks that followed brought a change nobody at Blackwood Manor had expected. Not a dramatic change. Not all at once. But little by little, day after day, the mansion began to breathe again. The staff noticed it first. The cook noticed fewer untouched meals returning to the kitchen. The gardeners noticed 2 small girls running through flower paths that had been empty for nearly 2 years. Even the security guards at the front gate noticed something unusual. Sometimes, when Nathan's car pulled into the driveway, 2 excited little figures came racing down the front steps to greet him. That had not happened since Victoria's death. Claire never forced happiness. That was the difference. She never told the twins to stop being sad. She never pretended their mother hadn't existed. Instead, she found ways to make room for both grief and joy. Some mornings they talked about Victoria. Other mornings they painted pictures. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they laughed. And slowly, the girls began to understand something important. Missing their mother and being happy were not enemies. They could do both. They could remember her and still smile. They could love her and still live. One rainy afternoon, Claire sat at the dining room table helping the twins paint. Emma painted flowers. Lily painted a rainbow. Claire painted what looked suspiciously like a potato wearing sunglasses. The twins burst into laughter. That's not a person, Emma declared. It is, Claire argued. It's a businessman. Lily giggled. He looks silly. He owns 3 companies, Claire said seriously. The girls laughed harder. At that exact moment, Nathan walked into the room carrying a stack of documents. He stopped. The sight before him was almost surreal. His daughters were laughing so hard they could barely sit upright. Paint covered the table. Paint covered Claire's hands. And somehow, paint had ended up on Lily's nose. Nathan hadn't heard laughter like that in years. For a moment, he simply watched. Unnoticed. Then Emma spotted him. Daddy! Both girls jumped from their chairs and ran toward him. Nathan barely had time to set down his documents before two tiny bodies crashed into him. He froze, because for months after Victoria died, physical affection had almost disappeared. The girls rarely hugged him anymore. Not because they didn't love him, but because grief had built walls around all of them. Now those walls were beginning to crack. Nathan wrapped his arms around both daughters, holding them tighter than usual, longer than usual, and for a brief moment he closed his eyes. That evening, after dinner, Nathan found Claire sitting alone on the back patio. The sun was setting behind the trees. The twins were asleep. The mansion was unusually peaceful. Claire looked up as he approached. "Good evening, sir." Nathan sat down across from her. For several seconds neither spoke. Then he surprised himself. "You've done more in a month than anyone has managed in almost 2 years." Claire looked uncomfortable receiving praise. "They did most of the work." Nathan shook his head. "No." His voice was quiet. "They trusted you." Claire glanced toward the house. "I think they just needed someone willing to stay." The words landed harder than she intended. Nathan lowered his eyes. Because he knew she was right. Too many people had left. Too many promises had been broken. Too many goodbyes had followed tragedy. Claire wasn't the first person to care about the girls. She was simply the first person who stayed long enough for them to believe it. A silence settled between them. Not awkward, just thoughtful. Then Nathan asked a question he had never asked before. "Why childcare?" Claire smiled faintly. "My parents died when I was 9. Nathan looked at her, surprised. She rarely talked about herself. "My grandmother raised me." She stared out at the gardens. "When people lose someone important, everyone focuses on the adults." Nathan listened carefully. "But children get lost in the process." Her voice softened. "They feel things they don't understand." The billionaire said nothing, because every word described his daughters perfectly. Claire continued. "I remember wishing someone would explain what was happening." Nathan looked away. Guilt tightened in his chest. Because while he had been drowning in his own grief, he hadn't realized how deeply his daughters were drowning too. Later that night, after Claire left, Nathan remained on the patio alone. The sun had disappeared. The gardens were quiet. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to think about Victoria without immediately looking away from the memory. He remembered her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she always knew exactly what the girls needed. Then another thought appeared, one that surprised him. Claire reminded him of Victoria. Not because they looked alike. They didn't. Not because they sounded alike. They didn't. But because both women understood something he never had. People didn't heal because someone solved their problems. People healed because someone stayed beside them while they hurt. And for the first time, Nathan began to realize that Claire Parker was becoming far more important to his family than anyone had planned. The only question was how far that change would go. And neither of them yet knew that a storm was coming, one that would test every bond they had built. The weeks that followed brought a change nobody at Blackwood Manor had expected. Not a dramatic change. Not all at once. But little by little, day after day, the mansion began to breathe again. The staff noticed it first. The cook noticed fewer untouched meals returning to the kitchen. The gardeners noticed 2 small girls running through flower paths that had been empty for nearly 2 years. Even the security guards at the front gate noticed something unusual. Sometimes, when Nathan's car pulled into the driveway, 2 excited little figures came racing down the front steps to greet him. That had not happened since Victoria's death. Claire never forced happiness. That was the difference. She never told the twins to stop being sad. She never pretended their mother hadn't existed. Instead, she found ways to make room for both grief and joy. Some mornings they talked about Victoria. Other mornings they painted pictures. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they laughed. And slowly, the girls began to understand something important. Missing their mother and being happy were not enemies. They could do both. They could remember her and still smile. They could love her and still live. One rainy afternoon, Claire sat at the dining room table helping the twins paint. Emma painted flowers. Lily painted a rainbow. Claire painted what looked suspiciously like a potato wearing sunglasses. The twins burst into laughter. "That's not a person," Emma declared. "It is," Claire argued. "It's a businessman." Lily giggled. "He looks silly." "He owns 3 companies," Claire said seriously. The girls laughed harder. At that exact moment, Nathan walked into the room carrying a stack of documents. He stopped. The sight before him was almost surreal. His daughters were laughing so hard they could barely sit upright. Paint covered the table. Paint covered Claire's hands. And somehow, paint had ended up on Lily's nose. Nathan hadn't heard laughter like that in years. For a moment, he simply watched, unnoticed. Then Emma spotted him. "Daddy!" Both girls jumped from their chairs and ran toward him. Nathan barely had time to set down his documents before two tiny bodies crashed into him. He froze, because for months after Victoria died, physical affection had almost disappeared. The girls rarely hugged him anymore. Not because they didn't love him, but because grief had built walls around all of them. Now those walls were beginning to crack. Nathan wrapped his arms around both daughters, holding them tighter than usual, longer than usual, and for a brief moment he closed his eyes. That evening, after dinner, Nathan found Claire sitting alone on the back patio. The sun was setting behind the trees. The twins were asleep. The mansion was unusually peaceful. Claire looked up as he approached. "Good evening, sir." Nathan sat down across from her. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then he surprised himself. "You've done more in a month than anyone has managed in almost 2 years." Claire looked uncomfortable receiving praise. "They did most of the work." Nathan shook his head. "No." His voice was quiet. "They trusted you." Claire glanced toward the house. "I think they just needed someone willing to stay." The words landed harder than she intended. Nathan lowered his eyes. Because he knew she was right. Too many people had left. Too many promises had been broken. Too many goodbyes had followed tragedy. Claire wasn't the first person to care about the girls. She was simply the first person who stayed long enough for them to believe it. A silence settled between them. Not awkward, just thoughtful. Then Nathan asked a question he had never asked before. "Why childcare?" Claire smiled faintly. "My parents died when I was 9. Nathan looked at her, surprised. She rarely talked about herself. "My grandmother raised me." She stared out at the gardens. "When people lose someone important, everyone focuses on the adults." Nathan listened carefully. "But children get lost in the process." Her voice softened. "They feel things they don't understand." The billionaire said nothing, because every word described his daughters perfectly. Claire continued. "I remember wishing someone would explain what was happening." Nathan looked away. Guilt tightened in his chest. Because while he had been drowning in his own grief, he hadn't realized how deeply his daughters were drowning too. Later that night, after Claire left, Nathan remained on the patio alone. The sun had disappeared. The gardens were quiet. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to think about Victoria without immediately looking away from the memory. He remembered her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she always knew exactly what the girls needed. Then another thought appeared, one that surprised him. Claire reminded him of Victoria. Not because they looked alike. They didn't. Not because they sounded alike. They didn't. But because both women understood something he never had. People didn't heal because someone solved their problems. People healed because someone stayed beside them while they hurt. And for the first time, Nathan began to realize that Claire Parker was becoming far more important to his family than anyone had planned. The only question was how far that change would go. And neither of them yet knew that a storm was coming, one that would test every bond they had built. The storm arrived 3 weeks later. Not the kind people expected. Not thunder. Not lightning. Not rain. The dangerous storms are often the ones nobody sees coming. Blackwood Technologies was hosting its annual charity gala. It was one of the largest fundraising events in Seattle. Business leaders, celebrities, politicians, philanthropists. Hundreds of guests would fill the ballroom of the Blackwood Grand Hotel. For Nathan, attendance wasn't optional. The event had been scheduled months earlier. Normally, he would have gone alone. But this year was different. For the first time since Victoria's death, Emma and Lily had expressed interest in attending. When Claire mentioned the gala during breakfast, both girls became curious. "A party?" Lily asked. "With dresses?" Emma added. Claire laughed. "Lots of dresses." Nathan watched quietly from across the table. The excitement on their faces caught him by surprise. They hadn't shown interest in public events for nearly 2 years. Part of him worried. What if it was too much? Too many people. Too much noise. Too many reminders of the life they had lost. But another part of him saw something else. Progress. Real progress. So he agreed. The night of the gala arrived. The hotel shimmered with light. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Music floated through the grand ballroom. Guests filled every corner. The twins looked like little princesses. Emma wore a pale blue dress. Lily wore soft lavender. Claire helped prepare them before the event, carefully fixing their hair and calming their nerves. When Nathan saw them walking into the ballroom, his heart nearly stopped. For a moment they looked exactly like Victoria's daughters. Confident, beautiful, full of life. The resemblance was almost painful. The evening started perfectly. The twins greeted guests, accepted compliments, even smiled for photographs. Nathan couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this proud. Everything seemed fine, until it wasn't. Around 8 o'clock, Nathan was speaking with investors. Claire was helping the girls choose desserts. The ballroom was crowded, busy, distracting. One moment Emma stood beside her sister. The next moment she was gone, completely gone. At first Claire assumed she had wandered a few feet away, a child chasing curiosity. Nothing unusual. But after 2 minutes, she couldn't find her. After 5 minutes, concern appeared. After 10 minutes, panic arrived. The search began quietly. Claire checked nearby hallways, restrooms, the lobby. Nothing. She returned to Lily. "Have you seen your sister?" Lily's face immediately turned pale. "No." The answer hit like ice. Claire's heart started pounding. Nathan noticed the change instantly. "What happened?" Claire looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't find Emma." Everything stopped. The room, the music, the conversations. Nathan's world narrowed into a single terrifying sentence. "We can't find Emma." Within minutes, hotel security joined the search. Staff checked every floor, every conference room, every exit. Guests began whispering. The atmosphere shifted from celebration to concern. Nathan searched personally, running through corridors, calling her name, checking every possible place. His chest tightened with every passing minute, because he knew fear, he knew loss, and suddenly every terrible possibility flooded his mind. Meanwhile, Claire forced herself to stay calm. Panic wouldn't help. Thinking would. She closed her eyes, remembering, observing. Emma wasn't random. Emma always moved toward memories, toward places that reminded her of her mother. Then something clicked. A conversation from earlier that week. Victoria used to bring the girls to this hotel every Christmas. Nathan had mentioned it casually. The old rooftop garden, their favorite place. Claire's eyes widened. Without wasting another second, she ran toward the elevators. The rooftop garden sat nearly empty beneath the night sky. City lights stretched endlessly across Seattle. A cool breeze moved through the flowers. And there, sitting alone on a wooden bench, was Emma, her tiny legs dangling above the ground, her eyes fixed on the stars. Claire stopped. Relief nearly knocked her to the ground. For a moment she couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Finally, she approached slowly. "Emma." The little girl turned. Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I wanted Mommy." The words shattered Claire's heart. Emma looked back toward the sky. "Daddy said Mommy liked looking at the stars here." Claire sat beside her. Neither spoke for a moment. The city glowed beneath them. Silent, beautiful, sad. Then Emma asked the question, the one that revealed what this night had really been about. "Do you think Mommy still remembers me?" Claire's eyes filled instantly. She wrapped an arm around the little girl. "Oh, sweetheart." Emma leaned into her. Small, fragile, brave. Claire kissed the top of her head. "Your mother could never forget you." Emma's tears finally spilled over, and Claire held her tightly, as if she could protect her from every sadness in the world. Moments later, the rooftop door burst open. Nathan appeared, breathing hard, desperate, terrified. Then he saw Emma, safe, alive, in Claire's arms. The relief was so overwhelming that his knees nearly gave out. For a second he couldn't speak, could only stare, because in that moment he realized something frightening. The thought of losing his daughter had hurt just as much as losing Victoria, and the thought of Claire not finding her was something he didn't even want to imagine. The storm had passed, but it had revealed something none of them were prepared to face. Nathan didn't remember crossing the rooftop. One moment he was standing by the door. The next, he was kneeling in front of Emma. His hands trembled as he pulled her into his arms. For several seconds he couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except hold his daughter. Emma wrapped her little arms around his neck. "I'm sorry, Daddy." Nathan closed his eyes. The fear he had been carrying for the last hour finally broke loose. "You scared me." His voice cracked. The words were barely audible, but Emma heard them, and so did Claire. For the first time since Victoria's death, Nathan wasn't acting like the billionaire everyone admired. He wasn't acting like the powerful CEO who controlled billion-dollar deals. He was simply a father, a frightened father who almost lost his child. Again. The ride home was quiet. Emma slept against Nathan's shoulder in the back seat. Lily slept beside Claire. The city lights drifted past the windows. Nobody spoke. There was nothing left to say. The night had already said enough. When they arrived at the mansion, Claire carried Lily upstairs. Nathan carried Emma. The twins were exhausted. Within minutes, both girls were asleep. Safe. Warm. Home. Claire quietly closed the nursery door behind her. Then exhaled. For the first time all evening, the adrenaline was finally wearing off. Her legs felt weak. Her head ached. She walked toward the staircase, planning to go to bed, planning to finally rest. "Claire." Nathan's voice stopped her. She turned. He stood at the end of the hallway, still wearing his tuxedo, still looking shaken. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Nathan did something completely unexpected. He said the words no employer had ever said to her before. "Thank you." Claire smiled softly. "They're worth it." Nathan shook his head. "You don't understand." His voice lowered. Most people would have called security and waited. Claire looked confused. They were already searching. "Exactly." Nathan stepped closer. "But you kept thinking." His eyes met hers. "You remembered something I mentioned weeks ago." Claire hadn't thought about it. Not really. To her, it had seemed obvious. Emma missed her mother. The rooftop garden was connected to a memory. She had simply followed her instincts. But Nathan saw something deeper. He saw someone who paid attention. Someone who genuinely cared. Someone who treated his daughters as people rather than responsibilities. And that meant more than money could ever buy. The following morning, news of what happened spread through the mansion. The staff learned how Claire found Emma. The rooftop. The memory. The conversation. The understanding. Even Margaret seemed impressed, though she tried not to show it. Tried. And failed. "This house hasn't felt like this in years," she admitted while helping set breakfast. Claire looked up. "What do you mean?" Margaret smiled faintly. "Hope." That afternoon, something unusual happened. Nathan canceled 3 meetings. Then 2 more. Then an entire board presentation. His assistant nearly fainted. Nathan Blackwood didn't cancel important meetings. Ever. But instead of spending the afternoon with investors, he spent it with his daughters. And Claire. Together they built a giant blanket fort in the family room. At first Nathan simply watched. Awkwardly. Unsure what to do. He wasn't used to play anymore. Business came naturally. Fatherhood suddenly felt unfamiliar. Claire noticed. Without saying a word, she handed him a blanket. "Hold this side." Nathan blinked. "What?" "The roof is collapsing." Emma immediately pointed. "Help Daddy." Lily nodded seriously. "We need engineers." Claire smiled. "Good thing your father builds things." The twins giggled. Nathan found himself holding up blankets while 2 little girls issued construction orders. 30 minutes later, he was crawling through a tunnel made of pillows. An hour later, he was pretending to be a dragon. By evening, the twins were laughing so hard they could barely breathe. And for the first time in a very long time, Nathan was laughing too. That night, after everyone went to bed, Nathan sat alone in Victoria's old music room. The room Claire had opened weeks earlier. Moonlight filtered through the windows. The piano sat quietly in the corner. Nathan stared at a photograph resting on top of it. Victoria smiling. The twins in her lap. A perfect moment frozen forever. He picked up the frame. For months, he had avoided this room. Avoided these memories. Avoided the pain. But tonight felt different. Because for the first time since she died, the house didn't feel broken. It felt healing. Slowly. Imperfectly. But healing. Nathan looked at the photograph and smiled sadly. "You would have liked her." His voice echoed softly through the room. He wasn't talking about a nanny. Not anymore. He was talking about someone who had become part of the family. Someone who had changed all of them. Someone who had brought life back into a house filled with grief. And although Nathan didn't realize it yet, his feelings for Claire Parker were beginning to change too. The problem was that another challenge was coming. One that would reveal a secret about Claire's past. A secret she had spent years trying to hide. And when Nathan discovered it, nothing between them would ever be the same again. 3 weeks later, Nathan Blackwood returned home earlier than expected. A major business meeting in San Francisco had been canceled at the last minute. Normally, he would have informed the staff. This time, he didn't. For once, he wanted a quiet surprise. The driver dropped him at the mansion shortly after 4 in the afternoon. The house seemed unusually quiet. Nathan loosened his tie and stepped inside. No staff rushed to greet him. No voices echoed through the hallways. Curious, he walked deeper into the house. Then he heard something. Music. Soft piano music. Coming from Victoria's old music room. Nathan stopped instantly. Nobody used that room. Not anymore. At least, nobody except Claire and the twins. Slowly, he followed the sound. Each step brought him closer. And then he reached the doorway. What he saw made him freeze. Completely freeze. Emma sat at the piano, her small fingers carefully pressing keys. Not perfectly. Not even close. But she was trying. Lily stood beside her singing softly. And Claire sat between them. Helping. Encouraging. Smiling. The room that had once been locked in grief was alive again. The room that had become a memorial had become a place of joy. But that wasn't what stopped Nathan. It was what hung on the wall. A brand new frame. One he had never seen before. Inside was a family photograph. Not just Victoria. Not just the twins. Not just himself. It was a collage. Victoria smiling. The twins laughing. Nathan holding them. And newer photographs. The water hose day. The blanket fort. The rooftop garden. The painting afternoon. Moments of healing. Moments of life. Moments worth remembering. At the bottom of the frame were simple words. Love never leaves. It changes form. Nathan's throat tightened. He couldn't look away. Claire finally noticed him. Mr. Blackwood? The twins turned. Daddy. They ran toward him. Nathan knelt automatically, wrapping his arms around both girls. But his eyes remained fixed on the frame. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Emma smiled. Claire helped us make it. Lily nodded. We wanted Mommy to be with us. Nathan looked at the photograph again, and suddenly understood. For nearly 2 years, he had been trying to protect his daughters from grief. He had removed pictures, avoided memories, locked away pain. But healing had begun only when Claire did the opposite. She taught them to remember, to talk, to cry, to laugh, to love, not despite loss, but alongside it. Nathan stood slowly, his eyes filled with tears he no longer tried to hide. He walked to the frame, touched it gently, then looked at Claire. You gave them back something I thought was gone forever. Claire shook her head. No. Nathan frowned. No. She smiled softly. I didn't give it back. The twins moved closer, listening. Claire looked at the girls, then back at Nathan. It was always there. She placed a hand over her heart. They just needed someone to help them find it again. Silence filled the room. Beautiful silence. The kind that comes after healing. That night, after the twins had gone to bed, Nathan sat alone in Victoria's music room. The house felt different now. Warmer. Lighter. Alive. He stared at the collage for a long time. Then he smiled. Because for the first time since Victoria died, remembering didn't only bring pain. It also brought gratitude. Gratitude for what they had. Gratitude for what remained. Gratitude for the people who stayed. Especially Claire. Moral lessons from this story. 1. Money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy healing. Nathan had billions of dollars, yet none of it could heal his daughters' broken hearts. What they needed most was love, patience, and understanding. 2. Grief should be faced, not buried. The family began healing only when they stopped avoiding memories and started embracing them. 3. Children need to be heard, not just cared for. Claire listened to what Emma and Lily felt instead of trying to force them to be happy. 4. True strength is staying when things are difficult. 11 nannies left. Claire stayed. Sometimes the greatest act of love is simply refusing to walk away. 5. Kindness changes lives in ways we may never fully understand. One person's patience transformed an entire family. 6. Your pain can become someone else's healing. Claire's own childhood loss became the reason she could help grieving children so deeply. 7. Love does not end when someone dies. The people we lose remain part of us through memories, lessons, and the love they leave behind. 8. Healing is not forgetting. Real healing comes when we learn to carry our memories with peace instead of fear. 9. Families are built by commitment, not perfection. Nobody in this story was perfect, but they chose to show up for one another. 10. One caring person can change an entire home. Never underestimate the impact of a loving heart. Thank you for watching Super Stories. If this story touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Whether you're in the USA, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, South Africa, Nigeria, or anywhere else in the world. And remember, sometimes the person who changes your life doesn't arrive with power, wealth, or influence. Sometimes they arrive with nothing more than patience, compassion, and a heart willing to stay. Subscribe to Super Stories for more unforgettable billionaire stories, emotional family journeys, and inspiring life lessons.